Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neals C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. It feels like a bit of a strange week at the moment because, as regular listeners will know, I was approached to write a book back in 2019 called Great TED Talks, exploring all the best innovation TED Talks out there. And that book was signed off and finished in September last year, but it's only just coming out on May the 5th on Amazon. And one of the lessons I've learned on there for any wannabe authors is that self-publishing means that you are the boss and it can be turned around much more quickly, but it does involve a whole heap of extra work such as formatting and stressing about book covers. So the good news is I've managed to avoid all that and had nothing to worry about. But when a publisher takes the reins, the process does take much longer. However, all that said, my book, Great TED Talks Innovation, will be out shortly, so a big thank you to everyone for bearing with me. And you can find more details about it on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and of course, Amazon. But I don't invite you to listen to this podcast, to listen to me talk about me and my new book. Every day, I try to explore how technology is transforming multiple industries, our lives, and indeed our world, and also bust a few myths along the way. So if I was to ask you, who is the biggest tech influencer within your organisation? I'm curious, what would you say? If you said the Chief Technology Officer, you wouldn't be alone. But the actual answer is arguably the CFO. Yes, the Chief Finance Officer is increasingly being considered in some circles as the biggest tech influencer that you'd never expect. And although we often hear about the value and importance of digital transformation, who exactly should be driving these efforts within your organisation? So after exploring this topic, I invited Rich Penkoski, Deputy CEO of Markets at Deloitte Consulting, to come on this podcast and talk about how CFOs are actually leading the way as key players and incubators of the digital transformation, as well as much more, of course. So Rich is responsible for defining and delivering the industry-specific insights and solutions that clients need to solve their most complex business challenges. And Rich has also led many of Deloitte's largest finance and IT-enabled transformation programs and has served many of Deloitte's consulting most significant clients right across financial services, retail and consumer products. But I'm also intrigued by how he believes that measurable and sustainable value can only be achieved when strategy, implementation and ongoing operations are delivered through a combination of business acumen, technical excellence and extensive industry depth. So it sounds like we've got a lot to go at. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Atlanta so we can speak with Rich now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Neil, thank you. It's great to be with you today. So I've spent my entire career working at the intersection of technology and finance, and with the last 25 years of that being at Deloitte Consulting. I've had the privilege of helping some of the largest companies in the world reinvent their finance capabilities through technology and operating model design. And as you can imagine, it's been a very interesting seat to watch the role of CFOs and CIOs evolve as the technologies have changed. I currently serve as the Deputy CEO of Deloitte Consulting today here in the US, where I head up our efforts around industry depth. And that's really all about ensuring we bring the right industry-specific perspectives and solutions to the markets and to the clients that we serve. And like many of your listeners today, I currently enjoy spending my free time looking for ways to get the most out of our virtual working environment.
I'm glad you brought that up because, like I said, you do have 25 years of consulting experience, focusing primarily on helping large global enterprises optimize their financial reporting and analytic capabilities, and also modernizing their technology infrastructure, which is incredibly cool. But I'm curious, what impacts are you seeing COVID-19 having on businesses right now, and how are they attempting to overcome these challenges? Because I think we all know about the problems and we've all been through that change curve, but now we're starting to look for solutions and how can we adapt and overcome, aren't we?
Yeah, we certainly are, Neil. And look, there are models and predictions everywhere. And, I think the only thing that's certain is that none of us can really predict the future with any certainty. I do think, though, that there are two areas that we see consistently and I suspect will endure not only through this crisis, but well beyond. And, the first one is just this whole new reality of virtual working, as I kind of alluded to in my opening remarks. I mean, this is all about new challenges and opportunities for leaders. I mean, if you think about it, virtual teaming, virtual collaboration has allowed many of organizations to maintain focus on their mission during this time, which is just incredible. But it also presents a higher risk of misalignment and lack of collaboration, which could take a toll on team trust, employee engagement if it's not done right. And so I believe it's going to be very important for every leader to thoughtfully consider their approach to virtual work and not just jump to the assumption that the screen is a substitute for traditional interaction as we get back to, hopefully some sense of normalcy. I think the second thing is that online security, which has always been a focus, is going to continue to remain a major focus both now and when the crisis subsides. And I'm particularly encouraged in what we're seeing around organizations and government working together to help maintain and protect connectivity and the access to technology for more and more of our population. So I think that'll at least be two of the more enduring things that we see coming out of this situation.
And with so much reliance on unified communications and working from home, it almost feels like digital transformation is now more important than ever. And although we often hear about the value of the importance of digital transformation, I suspect over the last few months that has changed somewhat. But who exactly should be driving these efforts within an organization?
Boy, it's a great question, and it's a question that many organizations are wrestling with. I would tell you that where we've seen digital transformation work well, it has really involved a collaboration across the entire C-suite. And, sometimes certain leaders will take more visible roles than others, but that C-suite really being galvanized around their digital strategy and the transformation journey they want to take is essential. And we would say that there is specific data that shows us that those digital transformations that are unencumbered by functional silos realize benefits faster, and the benefits are more sustainable. Also, Neil, I would say we're spending more time talking to boards about their role in digital transformation, just given the importance both near term and for the longer term viability of the enterprises. If I take a step back and you really think about the C-suite's role around transformation, I think there's a couple of big areas of focus. Some of them are a little obvious, some of them not so much. One of the most important things that we see is that there is oftentimes a desire to starve off some of the investments in core IT in order to support a digital transformation agenda. It's a very tempting step to take. But when you think about it, you really cannot reallocate in large portions that core IT infrastructure spend because you need it in order to support your digital transformation agenda, whether that's your cloud migration, your core apps, data platforms, you kind of name it. But it is important to maintain and for the C-suite to be aligned around maintaining that investment in core IT as they advance their digital transformation journey. The second thing, which also has really been an interesting topic in some conversations across organizations, is how do you actually get to the funding needed to support digital transformation journeys at the pace in which you need them to occur? And that is opening up all kinds of non-traditional collaborations and non-traditional access to capital that, CFOs and CEOs have to be aligned with. And then I'd say finally, we see everywhere that the ability to sustain and get benefit from a digital transformation exercise requires a culture change. It's got to make sure the organization is willing to work differently, that It's got the right kind of talent, that talent feels empowered to be successful. And again, that's a full C-suite and board conversation. And so, that's why this is so high on the agenda of organizations today.
And on this Daily Tech podcast, I always try and explore how technology is impacting multiple industries and indeed our world, of course. But in the world of business, it always seems that the chief technology or the information officers are usually top of mind. But I read some great work that you're doing there and talking about how the chief financial officer is equally as influential. So can you expand on that? And do you think the biggest tech influencer you'd never expect is actually that chief financial officer?
Oh, we absolutely do, Neil. And let's take a look at what's transpired from the CFO's seat just over the last several years, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I've got sort of 25 years of watching this unfold. If you really stop and take a step back, it's been the finance organization under the leadership of the CFO who's actually been oftentimes the early adopter of technologies that are actually essential in the broader enterprise. Just take a look at a few examples. If you look at ERP, both ERP work from the Y2K wave as well as what we see today around the migration to cloud ERP, oftentimes the finance organization is the first one to try out, accept, pilot, and use that technology. When we saw the surge in analytics, finance was the first domain to actually capitalize on the value, whether they were building predictive financial models, whether they were using advanced visualization techniques to enhance decision-making. It started there. The initial RPA experimentation started in functions like AP and crafting the standard narrative that accompanies financial reports, and even cloud, right? Something as ubiquitous and as important today as cloud, in many places started as a cost play, right? So it was championed by the CFO, and now it's a foundational building block for a business strategy. So we are clearly seeing that CFOs are, by their very, by their very role in the organization, are truly a driver in innovation in very unexpected yet important ways.
And I'm curious, how are you seeing CFOs leading the way as key players and indeed incubators of the digital transformation?
So, we did a tech trends report here recently in 2020. And, we would say that over the next 18 to 24 months, we expect to see more IT and finance leaders working together. And one of the biggest areas we see that happening, Neil, is on developing flexible approaches for funding innovation at what we've characterized as the speed of agile. And what do we mean by that? If you take a step back and you look at most organizations today, the way they think about the funding of an IT investment, by its very definition, embraces a traditional waterfall approach, right? Finance likes to see, what's the scope of the project going to be, how long it's going to take, how many IT resources, how many resources from the outside, what's the deliverable going to be, and what's the expected ROI over what course of time. But for those organizations who have a desire to adopt a more agile method and to think about their technology solutions more, from a product orientation, right? They're going to want to approach it very differently, right? They're going to want to look at the problem they're trying to solve. They're going to bring a cross-functional team together to address it. They are going to design, kind of using sprints and scrums. They are going to create a minimally viable product. They're going to get that product into production, and then they're going to enhance it, which flies in the face of the way that we typically finance a project. And so, the CFO is going to play a very important role in helping the organization flex its funding model to be able to actually deploy agile methods much more systemically than we've seen thus far. So that's a big change coming from finance. Now, we would never intend, nor do we expect organizations are just going to, kind of come up with something that's a shiny and unproven alternative. So they're going to have to work very closely with IT to make that a reality. Now, let me give you an interesting example of that. We've worked with a couple of organizations now where, as they have shifted their mindset to a more agile method, what they've done is they've actually, rather than allocating their IT investments somewhat evenly across various parts of the business, they've actually brought together, business unit leaders, key operators, key executives in the organization. They are stratifying the business problems that they're trying to solve they're looking at where their technology solutions are in their life cycle, and they're actually allocating investments, to actually achieve the most value, based on where that product is in its life cycle. So, very, very interesting. Changing the narrative between finance and IT quite broadly, and we expect to see a lot more of that to come.
And as someone that's been leading many of Deloitte's largest financial and information technology-based digital transformations, I've got to ask, can you share some of your experiences and the kind of lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy to. It's interesting, Neil. One of the most common things we see in all of these large transformation journeys is just how important the evolution of talent is to the success, not only of the program, but for the sustainability of the benefits that the program was hoping to achieve. And I'll give you a couple of thoughts about that, and then a couple of examples. If you stop and think about what most organizations have focused on with their professional workforce, it's oftentimes oriented towards process excellence, right? We want to be able to optimize our processes, have flexible processes, and really do things in a predictable and repeatable fashion. But as more technology disruptors have begun to enter into the equation, and as technology has become more sophisticated, we actually need a workforce who is able to be more decision-oriented, who can look at data that's provided in different ways and kind of change and adjust the process nearer to where it occurs on a more dynamic basis. That's not how organizations are geared today. And so you've got this interesting challenge where you've got a process-oriented workforce. You want them to become more analysis and judgment driven. And so you got to take them on the journey at the same time that you're implementing technology. So that's a big example. That's a big change. Now, interesting example of how we've seen organizations both solve their business problem and take their employee base on a journey. And one I'll kind of cite here is, we did some work for a multinational telecommunications company, and they historically relied on very classic development approach for core systems, and they were trying to move towards agile, and they were struggling. Right now, they were fortunate in that their mission really revolved around tech-enabled dissemination of information, right? So they had a tech-savvy workforce and a tech-savvy customer base. And the way their executive team chose to break the mold about how they went on a transformation journey is that they actually looked at what the problem they were trying to solve based on the creation of a customer journey map. So this organization actually took a look at how every one of their customers interacted with the organization and what internal process and what supporting technology that customer had an interaction with at every point along their journey, from the sale to field support to inquiry, et cetera. And it was astonishing because what ended up happening was, the organization began to see that they had a very inconsistent customer experience, or parts of the organization that prided themselves on their unique solution and how, their interaction with the customer was so sophisticated were, a little bit concerned that, later on or post-sale, it wasn't as sophisticated. So their journey map exercise allowed personnel from all different functions to understand for the first time, what an end-to-end customer experience would look like. And so, they reinvented a portion of their process for their customer. Then they actually turned that same journey map on for their internal use and began to look at how their employees interacted with the organization. And they've seen meaningful changes in both customer retention, customer profitability, as well as employee retention. So we know it works. We know it's got to be both people and technology based. And I think that offers a lot of opportunities in the future.
Now, you did say at the very beginning of the podcast, if we've learned anything over the last few months, it's that nobody can predict the future. And we're going to have to go back to December with so many of those predictions for the 2020 and the decade and so much more. And we all got blindsided by what happened to a certain degree. But with all that in mind, I know this is a big question, but looking to the future, how do you think CFOs and the wider C-suite can greater collaborate to drive those successful digital transformation efforts?
Well, 70% of business professionals expect to use online collaboration platforms, and they expect them to that usage to increase in the future. So the entire C-suite needs to set a tone, and they need to foster a culture that embraces the virtual teaming that technology can offer and the changes to the future of work, right? And so I think that that's going to be, vitally important, and that's going to support digital transformation and digital sustainability for the long haul. We also expect CFOs in the wider C-suite to begin engaging with their ecosystem partners to drive more innovation. And if you really begin to unpack that, and I do think this is key to the future, we are currently seeing and expect to see more organizations looking to drive digital change through not only internal efforts but collaborations with their customers, with their suppliers, with platform providers, the large cloud platform providers, with gig workers, and even academia. So, I think we are on the precipice of something quite dynamic and quite exciting when the traditional organizational barriers, both internally and externally, begin to fall. And we allow some of that digital enablement to accelerate all of these relationships. And I think that's going to generate, a lot more product offerings, a lot different changes to the way organizations service their customers. And I think a whole new generation of innovation.
And a lot of businesses were caught off guard when the stay-at-home mandate came out because they just weren't prepared to work from home, especially at scale. And of course, now the threat of a second wave, whether that be 6 months or a year, could actually force people to think, well, we need to be prepared and learn from those mistakes. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people listening will be tired of the doom and gloom, and we are entering solution mode now. So I've got to ask, what makes you hopeful about the future and the changes ahead in that post-pandemic world?
Oh, look, there's a lot to look forward to in the future. I mean, I'm personally really excited about the impact we're going to see from a generation of workers who grew up in an environment where technology was everywhere. I think that's going to challenge all of us to think differently and operate more virtually. I think new ways of working that we're seeing emerge are going to represent an incredible opportunity for today's worker to learn more, to do more interesting work, and hopefully get more personal and professional satisfaction. I also think it's going to open up all new domains of workforce that we hadn't thought about in the past. And we're only at the very beginning of digitally driven innovation. So I'm excited to see what new products and services are going to emerge. And I'm really excited to see how technology will address some of the more complex problems we face, not only in corporate America, but in society more broadly.
And before I let you go, is there anything else you can share with us today about Deloitte and the role that you're going to be playing in that future?
Oh, yeah. Look, Deloitte's going to continue to be a key leader and resource for our clients. And we want to provide insights that are going to help them not only survive, but to thrive. And we are really excited to help organizations capitalize on innovations in technology and the convergence of traditional industries, which is an important trend going on right now. Neal, at the end of the day, at our core, we believe that measurable and sustainable value is only achieved when you bring strategy, implementation, and ongoing operations and deliver them through a combination of business acumen, of technical excellence, and applying some extensive industry depth. And we're excited to continue to do that in the marketplace, and excited about the future for sure.
And we've covered so much ground today. I mean, we started talking about the Tech Trends report as well. So for anyone listening that would like to delve in a little bit further and find out more information about the work you're doing at Deloitte and some of those reports that we've talked about, what's the best way of doing that? And equally, contacting your team if they've got any additional questions or just want to continue that conversation we started today.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly invite everybody to take a look at our website at www.deloitte.com, where they can download Tech Trends or any number of the thought pieces that we have out there right now. And then I would welcome everyone to follow me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to getting to know your listeners more and to continue to watch this exciting and vibrant environment unfold.
Fantastic. Well, we are living in a world of 24-hour news channels, and there's even COVID-19 dashboards out there with a lot of scary statistics and things. But what I've loved about today's conversation is just taking a step back from all that and looking at the positive side of the future and how we can all work differently in the future by leveraging technology, and which is not only going to transform businesses, but entire industries and our world. So a big thank you for taking the time to come and share that vision with me today.
Thank you.
So a big thank you to Rich for sharing his experiences in leading many of Deloitte's largest financial and information technology-based digital transformations. But the big takeaways for me were how CFOs are leading the way as key players and incubators of digital transformation. And also how CFOs and the wider C-suite can collaborate to drive those successful digital transformation efforts. But back over to you. For any business leaders, decision makers, or anybody at all out there listening to this podcast, please share with me your thoughts about today's conversation by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can get me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Just look for @NealC.Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. I am interested in your thoughts, so please keep those messages coming in. And I do have some great guests lined up for you at the moment. We currently have, I think, 57 guests booked in. So I'm afraid you're stuck with me for a good while yet. And I do have a great interview with Citrix and Fujitsu coming up, but I'm not going to reveal any more. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neals C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.